Welcome to Sustainability Now, an exploration of technologies and paradigms to shape a world that works. Designed for socially conscious entrepreneurs and individuals interested in responsible stewardship of the planet. Sustainability Now covers food, energy, housing, water, waste, health, economics, and consciousness. Welcome to your community, Sustainability Now, with your host, Mira Rubin.
Welcome, everybody, to Sustainability Now, Technologies and Paradigms to Shape a World that Works. I'm your host, Mira Rubin, and today's guest is Chris Jacobs. Now, Chris is the CEO of Communally, the anti-poverty technology company, which is a Philadelphia-based benefit corporation that combines technology and public policy in a mission to end poverty. And Chris is a member of the board of the Sustainable Business Network of Greater Philadelphia and an active member of the Be Local Philly community. And we've brought Chris to you today because he is very, very well versed in B Corp and benefit corporations, in other words, alternative business structures that support social cause, essentially, or social awareness. And we're going to dig more deeply into that. Chris, I'm so glad to have you here today. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Great. So how about, there's so much to talk to you about, really. And I think that we want to just talk for a minute or two about Communally. And even before we get into that, I just want to remind our listeners that we're going to have a bunch of resource links, and those resource links will be available on the sustainabilitynow.global website for the podcast page. So tell us a little bit about Communally and your mission.
So the issue is really making access to the millions of people who either believe they're not eligible, don't know how to claim, and or just are scared to go into a county office. And so we work with community groups, churches, anybody who with somebody in a time of crisis may go to and say, can you help me? And so what we do is provide easy to use web-based services that can be used by any small or large nonprofit, state agency, reentry group, whatever, with the goal of getting what was last year $54 billion of benefits that were available to low and moderate income people in this community, in this society, but were never claimed.
And that's phenomenal. I want to get into talking about B Corps and benefit corporations, but I really wanted to give your organization some cred here and some kudos for doing what you're doing to help people receive the benefits that are available to them. So and the point, and one of the points I would make is that unlike other people, I know no other organization that has tax assistance and benefit application as a single platform. So you put the information in once, we do the taxes, we ask a few more questions, we then help people get a whole range of public benefits, veterans benefits, disability benefits. And so what happens, the 54 million that I talked about, a significant amount of that is the earned income tax credit. Because no longer, in most cases, do we provide assistance to people who don't work. So there's a work requirement for many people, most people, for food stamps, for SNAP, increasingly for medical assistance. But the earned income tax credit is usually the largest single check that most low-income households ever get in a year. We're talking $2,000 to $6,000. Wow.
And in Pennsylvania, there's probably something like 500, 600 million that is not claimed in EITC.
That's a remarkable number.
100 to 150 million in the city of Philadelphia.
Wow. Well, so if people want to learn more about your services, there may be people listening that potentially could benefit from those services.
Mm-hmm.
Where would they go? And this link, by the way, is going to be on our website at sustainabilitynow.global, but how could they reach your organization?
You can get us at communally.tech is the easiest way.
Okay.
Communally.tech.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I'm thinking that actually, when you started Communally, did you know about benefit corporations and B corporations, or was that an evolution into that?
It was an evolution. In fact, I didn't start the company. It was originally started as a consulting organization back in the early 90s, working on issues of poverty and doing research for advocacy groups, labor unions and other advocacy groups, and progressively did more and more with large data. And when I came on board 11 years ago as Chief Operating Officer, we were in the process of migrating to being a technology company. And that was my background, that and policy.
How did your evolution to a benefit corporation and a B? Actually, you know what, even before we talk about the evolution, maybe you can work into that explanation, the distinction between a benefit corporation and a B Corp.
So I'll start with B Corps because B Lab, which is a Berlin, Pennsylvania-based nonprofit, started propagating the idea that you could come up with a set of metrics which would allow people to measure in a hard way the soft topics of what we call a triple bottom line company, which means people, place, and profit. And so the certification of B Corps, sometimes known as benefit corps, but are normally abbreviated as B Corps, started maybe 15 or 16 years ago as a way of being able to say, yes, I can measure, and it has been approved by an independent body that I meet a set of criteria, which cover everything from environment to environmental impact, the way you treat your staff, what type of governance structure you have, and then a whole array of how do you benefit community. As a few years after that started, B Lab then started working with a law firm to construct a model for states to allow benefit corporations to be a legal form of structure.
When did this happen?
And
when, do you know?
I think the first ones were probably around 2010 or 11.
Okay.
The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania was the 12th ever. The legislation was passed in October 2012 and came into force on January the 21st, 2013. And we and HCA, Healthcare Associates, were the first two organizations to become what we tend to call public benefit corporations, but it's a designation of registration with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. One is and you can be registered as a benefit corporation without being certified by B Lab as a B Corp. increasingly, B Corp require that for recertification, and you have to recertify every 3 years, if you live in a state or an overseas country which recognizes benefit corporations as a registration, you are required to make the changes to your bylaws in order to be able to make all the stakeholders involved in that company
And community, surrounding
covered.
community.
Right, so which includes the community, so that the triple bottom line is enshrined in the Articles of Association of the company. And that's the real fundamental difference between B-Lab certification and benefit corporation, is that as a benefit corporation registered with a state, you have already made the move away from the primacy of shareholders. It says that in the event of an acquisition or a potential acquisition, you are required to look at things other than the return on shareholder capital. So that we think of companies that have recently been acquired who had a social mission, but for who had not changed their legal structure. They were legally bound to take an offer that they would not otherwise have taken, because the hedge fund that owned a significant 10-15% of the stock said, if you don't, we will sue you. So
Gotcha.
It gives companies that have a commitment to community, to the environment, to their staff, and of course to making enough profit to continue and to develop.
And a legal
commitment. They can balance all those. Right, a legal commitment.
So one of the things that I found was legal protection, reduced director liability, in that there's legal protection to balance financial and non-financial interests when making decisions. Whereas with traditional corporations, is pretty much based on the bottom line, right?
Right. I mean, particularly, well, I mean, it's the bottom line, but it's also, at the end of the day, it's shareholder equity. So
Gotcha.
the primacy of shareholders is absolute. And we have seen the rise of, activists, particularly hedge funds, who see an opportunity to quickly flip the company in a sense. That's where owners are really concerned and managers are really concerned about being something wider. Then it's important that they have the protection, a legal protection, which says, no, I have to balance what you want with our other if you like, stakeholders, and the community in many cases is a stakeholder in that enterprise. Yes.
So the beauty of that is that, as you're saying, it survives acquisitions. This mission and that doctrine survives acquisitions. So,
right.
Yeah. So people that are part of that company can have the assurance that it's not going to change in fundamental character if it gets acquired by some other organization.
Correct. And what we're seeing is that where organizations that have been acquired, that were certified Bs and or particularly benefit corporations, they have in many ways started to influence the larger organization so that other parts of a larger organization may then themselves become benefit corporations. Danona's done a great job in progressively making more of the organization in different countries benefit corporations and be certified.
So would you say that it's a growing trend? Is there momentum?
Absolutely.
There's momentum to it?
I mean, I think we're now at 2,500 or 2,700 companies worldwide. Italy has, I think, was the first non-US country to make it a form. The UK is in the process of doing that. Australia is in the process of doing it as well. We're seeing the spread of the B movement through Latin America. There's a very strong presence in Brazil. Sistema Bay organizes benefit corporations in Brazil, in Argentina, in Chile, and I think Colombia. So we're seeing a great move south as well. Canada has a very large B Corp movement. And Europe it's progressively moving through the European Union.
And the range.
And in fact, I think the very first certified B in Hong Kong, and I believe there's one about to be certified in Shanghai.
Wow.
So we're starting to see a presence in China as well.
And the thing about this is that it covers all scale of business. It covers multinationals to wholly owned subsidiaries to small business. Any company can be a B Corp, right?
Correct. They can be a certified B Corp. I mean, and the great thing about it, one of the things I really like is because you get effectively 200 different metrics that you respond to in the certification process. It gives managers a way in which to quantify and gives metrics for the non-financial aspects of the business. So we can get away from the point of view, yeah, it's all right. Yes, it's all very well to treat staff well, but what does that mean? And here's a set of 20 questions, right? Here's a set of metrics that you can measure yourself on every 6 months, for example, because you don't have to go through the process with B-Lab. I mean, you have the results you've done. You can go back through them and go, okay, let's choose 3 or 4 that we're going to work on this year. Are we going to, as we did last year, have a conscious campaign to diversify supply chain, buy much more from local independent businesses than we have, in a very conscious way. So we have a choice about who we buy stationery supplies from. Let's find somebody who's as local as possible. So those metrics allow us to say, we're going to set this goal. We can measure it every 6 months to see where we are.
That's wonderful.
Clearly in terms of diversity of hiring and things like that as well. It is one of the very few pieces of legislation that I'm aware of in the last 10 years, which has passed unanimously in the House and the Senate. Wow. And in fact, the prime mover in the House was a Lancaster state rep, who I think would definitely categorize himself as a significant conservative, and was moved and promoted in the Senate by one of the most progressive Democratic senators. And they agreed on the terms and got through they actually got it through. And I guess 2012, yes, it would have been our friend Tom Corbett who then signed it into law. So the fact that it was approved by a legislature and a governor who all came from the business-oriented community, I think showed the degree to which this, as a movement, has now moved out of fringe groups and, tree huggers. all of which I've heard us being accused of from time to time.
Well, frankly, I am proud to be a tree hugger, so I don't, I don't consider that a derogatory term.
No, but
people use it that way,
some use it.
right?
Indeed.
So really, I have so many questions. First of all, B-Lab is the global certifying organization?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
yes.
And they're in Philly. How about that? That's impressive.
Yeah, in Berlin, yeah.
Okay. And the other thing I wanted to talk about is really the major shift in paradigm that benefit corporations and B Corps represent. We already talked about taking into consideration the impact, the environmental impact and the social impact, but really the mission is to have business be a force for good, right?
Correct.
For good and for change.
And there will be, you'll see a campaign soon starting, which I won't use the slogan because I'm not allowed to at the moment, but which encourages, which makes much more visible B Corps, the meaning of B Corps, and how people can consider this in their daily lives. Making purchases, working with organizations, working for organizations, looking to work for organizations that are certified B Corps.
Well, in fact, that's probably something that our listeners are going to be very interested in, is how can they support this whole B Corp movement, and how can they identify B Corps. And so what kind of resources, which we'll post on our website, could you provide us for that?
So the main place you can go right now is bcorporation.net, which is B-Lab's website. There you can see, you actually can pull up lists by geography, by industry of organizations that are certified B Corps. And so one of the ways clearly is to use, where there are three organizations that are offering fundamentally the same service or product, then choose the certified B Corp as an organization that will use the purchase you've made as part of moving forward its mission of doing well by doing good. And that can be all sorts of different ways in which people volunteer, have their staff volunteer in the community. There are organizations that do extraordinary stuff in terms of environmental impact and remediation and regeneration of the environment. And one of the things that we're looking at more and more is the concept of regeneration of communities, of the environment, rather than just repair. Yes, you can do that. And as I said, coming in November, there will be a major public awareness campaign, which will provide more obvious ways. So one thing, and how can you tell if somebody's a B Corp? Most of us on our websites, or often on packaging now, have the B logo. So, which you can see again on the bcorporation.net site. It's a big B in a circle.
There is actually a B Corp directory.
Right.
And that's available to the public. We'll make a link to that on the website as well.
Sure. Yeah. But you can start looking for the B in the circle and the line underneath it, which says, attests that they are, or you go to our site, you'll see it. Look at my signature block if you ever get an email from me, and you'll see the logo, the B logo, which certifies that we are in fact a certified B Corp.
I want to clarify, you said November, and we don't know when people are going to be seeing or hearing this, so we'll say that's November of 2018.
Yeah, November 2018 is the planned rollout of a major awareness campaign.
Oh, that's wonderful. Good to hear. This is such a hopeful thing because business has such an expanded presence as a persona in this country. To be able to have business that has a moral directive is a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Yes, I mean it's I mean, and it extends much more. I mean, there is a move now, for example, for the business community just to stand up and say to legislators, for example, we need safe and secure elections.
Yes.
We have to have paper output from voting. And these are things that, again, there have been great moves by the administration, the Pennsylvania government. And one of the things that we've been talking to legislators about, been talking to people in the Wolf administration, is we as a business need to know that everybody has a vote and it is counted, and they can be sure, because it goes for us with the underlying principle of all we do, which is empowering people. So the fact that low and moderate income households live in despoiled environments, that there are or very often you have to travel some distance to buy food. You have to travel some distance to be able to vote. These all have to change if we're to make a fundamental shift in the relationships that exist between different ethnic, racial, and class groups in this society.
Wow, that's a mouthful. And how wonderful that there are businesses that are engaged in kind of leading that charge, which is, it's turning an old paradigm upside down, fortunately. Right. And it's what's it's required.
Right, and it's one of the things that SBN, the Sustainable Business Network, is working on across the board, all those elements, including the electoral issues.
Now, is Sustainable Business Network local?
There is Sustainable Business Network Greater Philadelphia is fundamentally the 5 counties of Southeast Pennsylvania and 3 counties of across the river in South Jersey. It is part of a larger movement called Valley, Businesses Aligned for Local Living Economies.
So it's BALLE?
Correct.
And would that be BALLE.org? Don't know.
I honestly can't. I will need to look at it, but I think it probably is.
No worries.
But Valley has members, some of which are called Sustainable Business. They have different names in different parts of the country.
Good.
But it's a national movement to combine the experience and good practices that organizations like the Sustainable Business Network of Greater Philadelphia have implemented and have discovered are promoting. And so, yes, wherever you are in the country, there is almost certainly an equivalent. I mean, places that sometimes I would not have expected, like Southwest Michigan, has a very strong community, and the West Coast, of course, where there's a lot of awareness of this. Portland is a
hotbed.
It's like Philadelphia. I mean, the interesting thing I find fascinating, given we are the city where computing started in the world.
I did not
in terms
know
of
that.
commercial computing. The first stored program computer was built at 34th and Walnut in the University of Pennsylvania.
I had no idea.
It was called ENIAC. Eckert and Maudsley, the professors who did that, it was built for the Department of Defense, set up the Eckert and Maudsley computing system or computing company, which I'm currently talking to you from 1128 Walnut Street. And at 1215 Walnut Street was where they started the work on the first real computer, the Univac 1,
wow.
which in fact was completed down in the Germantown section of Philadelphia.
Wow,
so we have a history.
I've lived here all my life.
First.
I've lived here all my life. I never knew that. I've heard of ENIAC. I just didn't know it was here.
Yep, it was Penn. Univac 1, which became the basis of the company Univac, who I worked for 15 years. And so the sustainable business movement really fundamentally started here in Philadelphia. I mean, Judy Wicks and Tom Balderston are amongst two of the people who really they created SBN. It was a spin-off from there that created VLab. They were the promoters of what became the Social Venture Network and the Investor Circle. So, there is Philadelphia is one of the great cities of firsts. And we know the history of the development of the United States, but there are so many other things that started here and have then gone out for all of us, even adopted Philadelphians who have who are known to have sort of reticence about maybe it's the Quaker heritage, right? About banging our own drum, but on the sustainability side, I think everybody who's active in it knows the city, knows of the city, and knows of.
Well, Philadelphia has a zero waste initiative by 2035 to be zero waste, which is pretty bold.
I mean, and the Green Water, Green City movement, which started maybe 10 years ago with the water department, has been copied across the world now. I mean, it's an extraordinary initiative to change the whole way in which water is moved and cleaned so that it's done in a natural way. And now we see with Rebuild the work that's being done to rebuild housing rather than destroying it and putting up new. Because we have this wonderful housing stock.
So, Chris, I have a couple other questions. I just want to find out what kinds of challenges you guys encountered when you were migrating into being a benefit corporation and B Corp certified.
I mean, first of all, in those days, at least it was finding out what tools were available and what it would really mean. And I would say, in many ways, it was already part of our culture, but we were now articulating it. And so articulating to all the staff as to why they should get behind it, and why in looking at the work we do and how we do the work and how we treat ourselves, each other, and the communities we work with, was not a difficult task, but one that was important that we did, so that it isn't just, hey, Chris has got a bright idea, I guess we have to go along with it. And so it became much more, part of the fundamental culture of the organization.
I'm wondering if you discovered that bred loyalty also in the community of your company.
I have, I am awed by, I am honestly awed by the level of commitment through good and definitely not good times. We have a great record of people leaving and coming back, leaving for what appear to be better jobs with large consulting companies, somebody who left to become director of technology, and an organization came back working for the person who took her previous job.
Wow.
And happily. And so we have, we've done I actually said to the staff at an all-staff meeting a couple of weeks ago, I really honestly am just awed by the level of loyalty and commitment to who we are and what we do.
So this is a really important point, and it aligns very much with what we're up to as far as sustainability now, believing that mission-driven life is possible, mission-driven work is possible. And I found an interesting statistic related to benefit corporations that millennials are going to be about 75% of the workforce by 2025. And 77% said that their company's purpose was part of the reason they chose to work there. And I think the point here is, and I'm sure that most of the people listening to this already have an experience of the importance of mission and purpose in life, and also now, thankfully, in business. So it's not just, making money, but it's really about making a difference in the world.
Right. And I'm, in that sense, I would guess most of my staff are millennials. There's a couple of us who are slightly older, and there's a couple who are whatever we call the generation immediately behind them in their early 20s. But the bulk of the staff, the management team, are indeed millennials who have shown their commitment and made their choices about how they want to live their life and live it within a city, commit to that city, and commit to making their values a core of how they live.
So Chris, are there any resources that you'd recommend besides the ones that we've mentioned already for folks that are listening to learn more about B Corps, benefit corporations, initiatives, new business initiatives, any books or other sites or organizations to check out?
There are various articles and pieces, some of which I think I already sent to you, and which you will include on the research list. There's an interesting project going on here in Philadelphia now, which is bringing together a whole range of print and visual media, TV, web, to really look at the implications of work, of poverty, and how we can move that. And that's called, I can't remember what you call it, report.
You know what? You can get it to me afterwards.
I will.
Okay.
But again, I mean, it's about the community we live in, but I think it has wider lessons about how you change the narrative around poverty, particularly, and about community, so that we don't stigmatize people who have disadvantages, but see the problems they have and potential solutions, so that an organization like ours, other organizations who have a mission that's very much about social conscience and social justice and economic justice, so that the conversation is different. And I think that's part of what I think you're looking to do, which is get the conversation moved away from blame and profit,
And
as being
into
the two sides that we end up being driven by.
Yeah, I don't have anything against profit. I think profit can coexist with humanity and social concern. And I think that, that's where we're headed for sure, is to be able to create a more equitable, just world in all respects. So is there any one book that you've read that had a profound impact that you'd recommend?
I think of one book that I've
Putting you on the spot here.
right. I'm actually in the process of reading a book called Death of the City. I can't remember the author, but I will get it to you. But which is about in inverted commas, gentrification, how that has changed communities, how it continues to change communities. And it then looks at the cities of New Orleans after Katrina, Detroit, New York City, and San Francisco as a result of Silicon Valley. But I think that's had that's crystallized for me a lot of things, and has brought, and there's a really well-written, well-articulated book on how interrelated the different issues of racial, social, and economic justice are.
Excellent. So we'll link to that on the site as well. And my last question is, what question, or is there a question you would have liked me to ask that I neglected to ask?
Is there anything
Until
that
now.
you neglected? I don't think so. I think the movement to fight for a just, green, sustainable world is one that I don't believe that it's. I don't believe most people would not want to see such a place.
Yeah.
And we just need to keep opportunities like this to tell people that it is doable, it is possible, and we just have to keep fighting.
Would there be one action step that you'd recommend?
I think the one action step would be start to use your economic power to support B Corps, so that people see that and speak directly to the fact that this is important in my life and I want to have an impact, and it's possible to do it. There are philanthropic ways, but here you can have a say every time you go to a store, or the organization you work for decides to buy some goods or services.
Perfect. So I want to say thank you so much for being with us today, Chris. This has been great. And
thank you.
And I want to thank our listeners. You guys are the ones that have the power to make the difference in the world. So thank you for taking action. And thank you to Scott Billy, our producer. And that's it for today. So until next time, live your best life, love the world around you, and together we can save the world.
Thank you for listening to Sustainability Now, solutions to shape a world that works. Visit sustainabilitynow.global for resources related to today's program. And be sure to subscribe, share, and follow us on social media.